Every time I spent the weekend at my future in-laws' lake house, I woke up from a sleep so heavy and wrong it frightened me. Not the kind of wrong that comes from too much wine at dinner. The kind where your body comes back online slowly, like a system rebooting after it's been forced off. My mouth would taste like metal. The light through the curtains would feel violent against my eyes, and every single time, my fiancé would laugh it off and say the lake air just hit me harder than most people. I believed him. For almost 8 months, I believed him. My name is Cassidy. I'm 28 years old and I work as a senior cybersecurity analyst for the National Insurance Fraud Bureau, a federal oversight agency that investigates fraudulent property claims, digital forgery, and authentication breaches. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, in a 2-bedroom house with thin walls and a faucet that dripped all night. My mother worked the front desk at a chiropractor's office. My father laid tile until his knees gave out. Neither of them had ever set foot inside the kind of place my fiancé's family owned on Percy Priest Lake outside Nashville. 12,000 square feet of glass and cedar, a private dock with 2 boats, a wine cellar that probably cost more than my parents' house. My fiancé's name was Lawson. He was the youngest son of Douglas and Miriam Hargrove. The Hargroves had been in Nashville commercial real estate for 3 generations: strip centers, mixed-use developments, warehouse conversions near the river. On paper, they were a community pillar, charity galas, hospital boards, their name on the donor walls of at least 4 nonprofits I'd seen firsthand. Miriam chaired a foundation that provided school supplies to underprivileged kids in Davidson County. Douglas sat on the board of 2 regional banks. That's what made it hard to see clearly at first. The first time I woke up wrong at the lake house, I chalked it up to the drive down. It was October, 6 months after Lawson proposed. Miriam had made chicken and dumplings. I'd had 1 glass of sweet tea. I woke up the next morning with a headache that sat behind my eyes all day, and a cardigan folded on the nightstand in a way I didn't remember doing. The second time was November, same heavy fog, same confusion about how I'd gotten into bed. That time my work phone had been moved from my purse to the bathroom counter. Lawson said I must have sleepwalked. The third time I paid attention to the details. My federal laptop bag had been on the dresser when I went to sleep. It was on the floor beside the bed when I woke up. I didn't say anything to Lawson, but that detail followed me home like a stone in my shoe. On Tuesday morning, 3 days after that third visit, I was reviewing authentication logs at my desk when a monitoring flag appeared in our internal system. We get these routinely, automated alerts whenever a user's credentials authorize a document outside normal business hours. I clicked it without expecting anything. The credentials were mine. At 2:17 a.m. on the Sunday I had been at the lake house, my digital authentication token had been used to access a federal claims portal. A property damage claim for a Hargrove Holdings commercial address in Antioch, Tennessee, had been submitted and digitally signed. My name was on the authorization. The claimed amount was $3.2 million for storm damage and water intrusion to a warehouse on the south side of Nashville. I read the entry 4 times, then I sat very still. I had not done this. I had been in that guest room, unconscious, or whatever it was they were doing to me, while someone else used my credentials to commit federal fraud. I pulled the full claim record. The documentation was thorough and convincing at first glance. Photographs, contractor estimates, engineering assessments, all timestamped to a storm event the previous August. I cross-referenced the weather data in our system. There had been no storm of that magnitude in Antioch that August. I checked the property assessment on file. The warehouse had been inspected 6 months prior and showed no structural damage. The claim was fabricated, and my name was the lock they'd used to open the door. I logged out of the system. I sat there for a long time, looking at nothing. Before I left work that afternoon, I drove to an urgent care clinic 2 miles away, not the one near my apartment, but a different one where nobody knew my face. I asked them to draw blood and run a full tox screen. The doctor looked at me carefully and didn't ask too many questions. She said results would take 48 hours. 2 days later, she called me. Trace amounts of a benzodiazepine consistent with a sedative compound had been detected. Enough to explain the deadweight sleep. Enough to explain the slow reboot every morning after. She recommended I contact law enforcement. I thanked her. I didn't call law enforcement yet. Because I knew exactly what would happen if I walked into a police station with a fraud flag that had my own credentials on it and claimed my future in-laws had been drugging me. The Hargroves had a real estate attorney, a criminal defense attorney, and a civil litigator, all on retainer. I'd heard Douglas mention it at dinner once, the way wealthy people mention these things, casually, the way you mention where you keep your umbrella. I had a talk screen and a log file with my own name attached to federal fraud. I needed more, and I knew exactly how to get it. At the Bureau, our authentication systems don't just record who accesses a portal, they record what devices were present in the wireless environment at the time of access, MAC addresses, Bluetooth identifiers, anything within range. It's a protocol designed to catch credential theft. The system is built on a simple logic. If your login is used in Denver while you're sitting in Nashville, the device mismatch will catch it. I pulled the full authentication record from that Sunday night. My laptop had been accessed from within the Hargrove Lake House wireless network. 3 other devices had been active in range during the window of the access: a smartphone, a tablet, and a secondary laptop. All 3 were registered to the same account. The name on the wireless account was Rowan, Phoebe's husband. Phoebe was Lawson's older sister. She and Rowan had been at the lake house that weekend. I remembered them leaving dinner early and going out to the dock. I remembered Miriam refilling my glass. Rowan worked in tech consulting. He was quiet at family dinners, always on his phone, always slipping out to take calls in the hallway. I had never thought much about him. I thought about him now. I spent the next 4 days building a complete forensic picture. I accessed the full claims history for Hargrove Holdings going back 5 years. 14 claims. Over 4 years, Douglas Hargrove's company had submitted 14 property damage claims to 4 different commercial insurance carriers. Flood damage, fire damage, roof collapse, HVAC system failure. Total paid out, just under $9 million. Some had processed without audit. 3 had triggered review flags and been quietly withdrawn. The 2 most recent were tied to federal insurance programs, which is why they had landed in my agency's monitoring system at all. Each claim came with professional-looking documentation. I ran the photographs through our image forensics software. Every single one came back as sourced from stock construction damage databases, the kind commercial contractors use internally for reference. The engineering reports were signed by a licensed Tennessee inspector whose certification number had been flagged as stolen 2 years prior. Rowan had been manufacturing these files. He had the technical expertise to build documentation that looked, on the surface, exactly like the real thing. And he'd needed my federal credentials to push the most recent claims through our oversight firewall, because our system had flagged the Hargrove Holdings tax ID after the 3rd withdrawn claim. Any new submission tied to that ID now required senior analyst authentication to process. My authentication, my name, my career used as a skeleton key. I understood then why Lawson had asked me out the first time. I understood the lake house weekends, the sweet tea poured by Miriam's own hand, the careful warmth that never quite felt earned. I had been recruited without knowing I was a recruit. Sitting with that knowledge was one of the harder things I've done. I had loved Lawson, or something I believed was him. Grief is real even when the thing you're grieving was built on a lie. But I had spent 6 years learning to keep evidence and emotion in separate rooms, and that skill did not fail me. I did not confront him. I texted Miriam that same week and told her I was looking forward to the next lake house weekend. She replied with a smiley face and said she'd make her apple cake. I went shopping on a personal account I'd opened that afternoon using a prepaid card from a Walgreens. I ordered 2 pinhole audio and video recording devices, one designed to look like a standard wall outlet adapter, one built into what appeared to be a USB charging block. I paid for 3-day shipping. When they arrived, I spent a Friday evening testing them in my apartment, calibrating the audio sensitivity, uploading test footage to an encrypted private server I'd set up under a name with no connection to me. Saturday morning, I drove to the lake house with both devices packed between 2 sweaters in my overnight bag. The atmosphere there was the same as always, polished, careful, warmly performative. Miriam hugged me at the door. Douglas shook my hand with both of his and called me sweetheart. Phoebe was on the porch with white wine. Rowan was at the kitchen island with his laptop open, which I now understood was never coincidental. While Miriam was in the kitchen and the others were on the dock, I went upstairs to freshen up. I plugged the outlet adapter into the wall beside the dresser, angling the lens toward the door and the area around the bed. I set the charging block on the windowsill ledge behind a decorative candle holder, facing the desk where I always left my laptop bag. Then I came back downstairs and let Miriam fill my glass. I let my eyelids get heavy at dinner. I let my words soften when Douglas asked about my workload. I excused myself early, the same way I always had, and went upstairs. I got into bed with my breathing slow and deliberate and my eyes closed. I waited. The house went quiet. There were voices on the porch for a while, low and indistinct, then footsteps on the stairs. The guest room door opened. I felt the particular kind of silence that happens when someone is trying hard not to make sound. Footsteps crossed toward the dresser. My laptop bag was lifted and carried to the desk. Then Rowan's voice, barely above a whisper, "She's out." And Phoebe's from behind him, "Get it done. We only have the window until the session token expires." I lay perfectly still. My heart was hammering so violently I was certain they could see it through my ribcage, but I did not move. I had sat across from corporate fraud suspects for years. I knew how to hold still inside a storm. "How long?" That was Lawson's voice, from the doorway, flat and businesslike, the voice of a man reviewing a project timeline. 20 minutes, Rowan said. "The claim is already packaged. I just need her fingerprint on the final authorization." A pause. "She's going to figure it out eventually," Lawson said. "By the time she does, the payout will be routed through 3 LLCs, Rowan answered. "Her credentials are on the authorization. She can suspect whatever she wants. She can't prove anything that doesn't come back to her." I felt someone cross to the bed and lift my right hand. I let my fingers stay completely limp. My hand was pressed against something flat and warm, the biometric reader built into my federal laptop. I kept my breathing steady and my eyes closed and my face blank. A soft confirmation chime from the laptop. "Filed," Rowan said. 7.8 million, it'll process by Tuesday." 7.8 million, not the 3.2 from the previous claim. A new one, larger, filed with my fingerprint while I lay 2 feet away. "Clean up," Miriam's voice came from the doorway. She had arrived silently. "Don't touch anything else. She needs to believe this was a normal weekend." The lamp went out. Footsteps moved toward the door. The door clicked shut. I gave it 10 minutes, then I opened my eyes. The room was dark and undisturbed. My laptop bag was back on the floor beside the dresser. They were good at making it look like nothing had happened. But I had 2 recording devices that had just captured every word. I had the biometric authentication log I'd set before leaving my office on Friday, configured to automatically capture and forward any credential event on my work accounts over the weekend to a protected inbox only I could access. The moment they'd pressed my hand against that reader, the event had been logged and forwarded. I had everything. I came downstairs Sunday morning bright and easy. I ate Miriam's apple cake and told her it was the best thing I'd tasted in months. I let Lawson put his arm around me at the breakfast table. I hugged Douglas at the door when I left and thanked him for having me. I did not let myself feel any of it until I was on the highway with the windows down. That night, I stayed at my best friend's place in East Nashville. At her kitchen table, I built the referral document. Every fraudulent claim, cross-referenced against verified weather data, property records, and licensing databases. The device MAC addresses from both unauthorized access events, the biometric log, the audio and video recordings, Rowan's voice, Phoebe's instructions, Lawson's question in the doorway, the talk screen from the clinic. I organized it in the exact format the FBI's Financial Crimes Division requires, because I had submitted referrals to them before, and I knew how they needed the data structured. I addressed it to the special agent in charge of the Nashville field office. I copied our inspector general. Then I set it to send automatically. Wednesday morning at 11 a.m., the exact start time of the Hargrove Holdings quarterly investor presentation. The one Douglas held every year at their downtown offices for partners, lenders, and the board of a regional development trust. Monday and Tuesday, I answered Lawson's texts and acted tired and distracted and apologetic about needing space. He was patient and warm in the way I now understood was always calculated. I said I'd see him next weekend. He sent back a heart emoji. On Monday, I also met with my supervisor and formally requested recusal from any file touching Hargrove Holdings, citing a conflict of interest. I handed her a sealed envelope and told her to open it only if something happened to me or if she was contacted by federal agents. She looked at me for a long moment. She nodded. Wednesday morning at 11:14 a.m., my phone rang from an unknown number. The woman who identified herself as a special agent with the FBI Financial Crimes Division told me they'd received my referral and were moving immediately. She asked for my location. I was in a parking garage 3 blocks from the Hargrove Holdings building. She told me to stay put. I watched from my car as 2 unmarked federal vehicles pulled up to the building at 11:41 a.m. 4 agents in dark jackets went through the front doors. What happened inside I learned from my debrief that afternoon. The agents walked into the investor presentation while Douglas was mid-sentence. They didn't wait. They presented warrants, instructed no one to leave, and arrested Douglas Hargrove in front of his investors, his lenders, and every partner he'd spent 30 years cultivating. Rowan was intercepted in the parking garage, trying to reach his car after someone inside texted him. The agents were already there. Phoebe was arrested at her home in Green Hills that afternoon. Lawson was brought in for questioning. When the agents played him the recording, his own voice, flat and practical, asking how long, from a doorway while I lay 2 feet away, he stopped talking and asked for a lawyer. Miriam was at a charity luncheon when they arrived. I was told she tried to explain, very calmly, that I had always been unstable, that my history of anxiety and overwork made anything I'd documented unreliable. The agents thanked her for the information and put her in the car. Rowan was convicted on 11 counts of federal insurance fraud, 2 counts of computer fraud and unauthorized access to a federal system, and 1 count of criminal conspiracy. He's currently serving 14 years in a federal correctional facility. His consulting firm dissolved before he was sentenced. Phoebe pleaded guilty to 4 counts of conspiracy. She received 6 years. The house in Green Hills was seized as part of forfeiture proceedings. The social circle she'd spent her adult life performing for didn't return her calls. Douglas was convicted on 10 counts of wire fraud and insurance fraud, 16 years. Hargrove Holdings dissolved within 90 days of his arrest. Every property, every account, every asset was subject to federal forfeiture to repay the carriers they'd defrauded. Miriam was convicted on 1 count of conspiracy and 1 count of administering a controlled substance without consent, a felony under Tennessee law. She received 5 years. The lake house was seized. The foundation she'd chaired quietly removed her name from every piece of printed material they'd ever produced. Lawson accepted a plea agreement, 1 count of conspiracy, reduced in exchange for his cooperation. 30 months, I don't know what he said in those cooperation interviews. I don't need to. I stayed at my best friend's apartment for 2 weeks after the arrests. Then I went back to my place, had the locks changed, and slept for 10 hours without anything in my system for the first time since October. My supervisor called me into her office after she opened the envelope. She sat across from me and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she told me I was the best analyst she had, and she was sorry I had to go through what I went through to build that case. I told her I wasn't sorry, I meant it. The thing about working fraud long enough is that you start to understand the particular arithmetic of entitlement. People who've had everything handed to them develop a very specific blindness. They mistake your patience for weakness, your professionalism for deference, and your silence for compliance. They see a woman who worked her way up from nothing and assume the fear of losing what she built will always outrun her judgment. They counted on me being more afraid of them than I was committed to the truth. They were wrong. They had been wrong about me from the first sweet tea Miriam poured with her own careful hands. I kept my clearance, I kept my record, I kept my name clean on every document that mattered, and the next time anyone tries to tell me that strange chemical sleep is just the lake air catching up with me, I'll know exactly what to pull out of my overnight bag. Before you go, let me ask you something. Have you ever let someone's version of you, the version they needed you to be, override your own clear reading of what was happening right in front of you? How long did it take before you stopped doubting yourself and started trusting what you already knew? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit close to home, hit the like button and subscribe to Floppy Revenge, because justice, when it finally lands, is always worth watching.